Welcome to Average Joe's Pool. Now if you're a fan of Viking cues, then you'll probably already know that the standard shaft option for all Viking cues is the ViKore. But we were very keen to get our hands on one of the other Viking performance shafts, and that's precisely what we're going to have a look at in this video. Let's take a look at the Viking V-Pro. And the cue that we're going to be taking a look at today has been kindly supplied to us direct from Viking for review. And what we have here, this is the Viking Helix, this is the HL0404 coupled with the V-Pro shaft. So just a quick rundown on the Viking company. Viking have been in existence since 1965 and they make their own pool cues at their own facility in Wisconsin, USA. So all of their cues, including this one, are made in the USA. Now when it comes to Viking pool cues, there are definitely a lot of different models to choose from. Now unlike a lot of other pool cue manufacturers, Viking don't tend to group their different models by either price or features. Instead, Viking currently have 10 categories that are actually distinguished by different names. So for example, we have the Ovation range, the Bedlam range, or what we have here, the Helix range. Now the price of the cues within each of those groups can vary quite dramatically. And the models that are contained in each of those 10 categories tend to be grouped together by the kind of overall feel and look of the cues. Now one very important factor to realise when it comes to Viking cues is that they have a standard shaft option that comes with all of their cues, and that is the Viking ViKore. And the ViKore shaft, just like our V-Pro, is a maple shaft. However, on that ViKore we do have an insert in the end. And so with the ViKore we do have that little bit of extra technology built in. If you're interested in finding out a little bit more about the ViKore shaft, then we have done a separate review for that. I'm going to add a link to that in the video description for you. Now although all Viking cues do come with the ViKore as standard, you can actually specify a different shaft option when ordering if you wish. That's precisely what we've done here. So the cue that we have here, this is actually the Viking Helix. This is the HL0404 and we specifically ordered it to be coupled with their V-Pro shaft. When it comes to weight options, the standard options from Viking are 18 all the way through to 21 ounces, and that does include half-ounce increments. Now there's a couple of big bonuses when it comes to buying yourself a Viking cue. As mentioned before, they are made in the USA, and additionally Viking also back their cues up with a full lifetime warranty, and that does include coverage against warpage. So when it comes to price on our Viking Helix, the model that we have here is currently $660. And do remember that the standard shaft option for all Viking cues is the ViKore. However, if you wish to change that ViKore over to what we have here, the V-Pro, there is no additional charge. And just for reference, if you wanted to buy the V-Pro shaft on its own, the current price on that is $200 compared to $240 on the ViKore. And if you are interested in buying yourself a Viking cue or indeed a Viking shaft, then we will be adding links into the video description for you for the very best places to buy these at the best possible prices. So if this video turns out to be helpful for you, please ensure that you help support what we do here at Average Joe's Pool. Please click on those links. So that's just about covered all the basics of what we have here. So let's delve in a little bit more detail with the spec check. First up, let's consider packaging, and unfortunately when it comes to Viking pool cues, the packaging is far from awe-inspiring. Their cues as standard just come supplied in a clear poly bag. So definitely no frills, but hey, it gets the job done. Now when it comes to features, looking at the particular combination that we have here, this is one of Viking's Helix models, complete with the V-Pro shaft. Thankfully, the particular model that we have here does include many of the features that you're going to find in all of the cues that exist within that Helix range. So the model that we have here, this is the Helix HL0404, and this is a bird's eye maple butt. And we have 4 points on this cue. These are finished in premium pearl, complete with a black IMA outline around the outside. And that pearl material is also repeated here. We have a decorative ring just below the joint. And for the wrap, this is a double pressed Irish linen wrap finished in black, complete with white speckles. And matching our black wrap, we also have a black acrylic butt cap. And for the joint on this cue, this is a stainless steel joint, and this has the standard Viking quick release pin. And for logos, first of all, on our rubber bumper, on the very end of it there, we do have the Viking V logo. And then additionally, we have the Viking logo finished in silver at the end of the butt cap. And then finally, at the end of the shaft here, we do have the V-Pro logo. So when it comes to this cue, and we're talking about the butt side of things, this is definitely well featured. But what about our V-Pro shaft? Now, unfortunately, the details on the Viking website about the V-Pro shaft are a little bit on the vague side. But when it comes to the ViKore shaft, Viking actually specified there that the wood that they use on those shafts has actually been aged for 5 years. Whereas on the V-Pro that we have here, it does also say that it is an aged maple, but unfortunately they don't specify any type of time frame. And this is a hard rock maple shaft, and we do have a pro tapered profile. That's definitely not the most extreme pro taper in the world. It comes down quite a way until you get that little shoulder kicking in around here. There's still a fair amount of room there for the bridge hand. Now, there are a couple of key differences between the standard ViKore shaft and what we have here with the V-Pro. Firstly, and perhaps most importantly, is the fact that on the ViKore it does actually have an insert at the front end of the shaft. Whereas what we have here with the V-Pro, this is essentially a simplified version of the ViKore, so this doesn't have the insert, this is just a fairly standard maple shaft. And additionally, on the ViKore, that does come with a Tiger Everest tip as standard, whereas on the V-Pro, it actually has a Le Pro tip. Now, when it comes to diameter, the standard diameter on the V-Pro is actually the same as the ViKore, which is 12.75 millimeters. However, when we measured this one in for diameter, it did come quite a way over that at 12.94 millimeters. It's also worth noting that there are a couple of other versions of the V-Pro shaft as well. First up is the V-Spin, and that has an even smaller diameter coming in at 11.75 millimeters and also has a more conical taper. And as you may well have guessed, with that smaller diameter, the V-Spin is more tailored for more kind of precision orientated shots and applying more English. And additionally, the other version of this is the V-Crush, and that comes complete with a phenolic resin tip, and of course that's used for break shots. But what we have here, this is the V-Pro, which is kind of the most standard kind of playing cue version of those three options. And then working our way up the cue, we have Viking's so-called indestructible ferrule. And on the Viking website, they state that they've actually made 300,000 cues using this indestructible ferrule, and they've not had a single one break yet. And for reference, the ferrule length that we have here, 19.01 millimeters. And for the finish on our shaft here, it has been lightly sealed, and the last inch and a half approximately has been varnished to help protect the logo. Now, when it comes to length as standard, this is a 58-inch cue, and when we measured it in, came in at 58 3/8 inches, including tip and rubber bumper. However, if we then remeasure, excluding the tip and the bumper, it came in bang on 58. And our overall length consisted of a shaft length of 29 3/16 inches, including tip, and a butt length exactly the same, 29 3/16 inches, including the rubber bumper. And for diameters measured at the butt, 31.97 millimeters, and our diameter at the base of the shaft, 21.25 millimeters. And with regards to weight, this is the 19-ounce version that we have here, and we weighed it in, came in a little bit over 19.29 ounces. And our overall weight consisted of a shaft weight of 3.96 ounces and a butt weight of 15.325 ounces. And we always like to remove the rubber butt cap and have a look at what's happening on the inside of the cue. And it's worth noting that the Viking weight system actually uses a bolt that doesn't have a head, also sometimes called a worm bolt. And the advantage of having that system is, rather than having your weight bolt sat directly at the end of the cue, which it has to if it has a head, instead it can actually be screwed up further into the body of the cue. And we did indeed find a weight bolt inside our Helix here, It's a 1.5 ounce weight, and we actually weighed that in as well, 1.492 ounces. And we also tested the Helix for its centre of balance, and that measured in at 18 and 11/16 inches, measured from the rear of the cue, including rubber bumper. And another big feature when it comes to buying any cue from Viking is the simple fact that they do back their cues with a full lifetime warranty, and that's definitely a great thing to have. So let's go ahead and give this its score for features. Overall, we have a cue with a slight contrast. Firstly, the butt is loaded with some great features, whereas the V-Pro shaft is purposefully very simple in its classic design. And with the aged maple being a standout feature of the shaft, which almost certainly will have been one of the key factors to the overall excellent feel of this cue. And so we definitely have some very good stuff going on here. Scoring our Helix V-Pro combo a mighty 3 stars out of 5 for features.
What the hell kind of an organization do we have, Joe? Jesus Christ, there are about 6 people out there!
So get ready as we delve into straightness. And in addition to basic visual inspections, we'll run 3 straightness tests. And first up is the classic table roll test. And the Viking appears to roll very well indeed, with nothing obvious jumping out. But this is the most basic of tests and an easy one. So let's move the difficulty up to medium with the rail roll test. And for this test we need to watch the tip for wobble whilst rolling the cue along the solid rail of the table. And now it's clear to see that we definitely do have some wobble on the tip, telling us that not everything is as straight as it should be. So let's move things up to maximum difficulty and move the cue over to the ball bearing cue rollers. And this super tough test leaves the cue with nowhere to hide, and the wobble can now be seen in all its glory. And as we move the roller to the centre of the shaft, we can see that this has made close to no difference in the amount of wobble. And as we move the roller up to the front of the shaft, we can see that this creates a distinct imbalance, which will also iron out the tip wobble entirely, leaving us with the wobble visible around the centre of the cue. And so it's definitely a disappointing result overall for the Viking. This level of wobble would be forgivable and somewhat expected if it were a $50 cue. But at over $650, we really should be seeing a far better result here. Scoring our Viking a lowly 2 stars out of 5 for straightness. Coming up shortly we have play testing, but before that let's check out deflection with the squirt test. And this test is conducted over 75 inches, which is the distance between the head spot and the rear rail for a 9-foot table. And we'll be using maximum parallel English coupled with a hard shot. And this test will be run for a minimum of 10 shots on both sides to help ensure we get an accurate overall average. And the Helix with V-Pro combo absolutely excelled in this test, with a frankly amazing score of 1 5/8 inches, which is not only way above average, but is also far beyond what we normally expect to see from a maple shaft. It's an exceptional result for the V-Pro, and also worth noting considerably higher than the Viking ViKore. And we expect that the sheer explosive power of this cue helped in this test, by giving the cue ball extra running speed to help ensure that that spin couldn't grab effectively before hitting the rear rail. But whatever the reason might be, it's an exceptional result. And so with positivity running strong, let's move on to our play testing. And so our technical tests are now complete. So now begins the fun stuff. We need to get this cue onto the table and start running some racks. And all products that we review here at Average Joe's Pool, we always ensure have a minimum of 5 hours of full use on the table before we formulate an opinion, just to make sure we can give it that fair and accurate review. So it's time to see precisely what the Helix plus V-Pro combination can actually do. What do you say? Let's play. And when it came to testing the combination that we have here with the V-Pro with the Helix from Viking, thankfully I actually had a little bit more time to test this than I thought I would due to scheduling. So all in all, I've probably put around 15 hours of play into this cue. And I have to say that overall it's an excellent cue to play with. It's definitely super reliable and dependable and has a good feel to it. You really do have to push this to the maximum of extremes to make this thing miscue. Solid and dependable. And solid is definitely the right word when it comes to the combination that we have here, because overall this is a very, very hard hitting cue. However, when I say hard, it is a hard hitting cue. However, it's a hard hitting cue in a very positive way. Now when it comes to hard hitting cues, very often they do have that kind of stiff and slightly dead feel to them, and they often come with that slightly kind of pingy noise as well, but that's absolutely not what we have here. Now whilst this is definitely a hard hitting cue, it's also an excellent cue to play with. It has a very warm feel to it and is excellent on feedback. I've got to say that I'm reluctant somewhat to use the word hard hitting cue in relation to what we have here. I think the better description would be solid hitting, because this really doesn't have any of those characteristics that you might normally associate with a hard hitting pool cue. So what we have here is definitely on the firmer side, but as I said, it does give great feedback. However, from my perspective, I do normally prefer a medium feel to my cues and my tips. So this is a little bit firmer than what I would normally play with. And this is where it was useful to have those extra hours playing with this particular cue, because it really does take some time to get this dialed in, especially if you're not used to that solid feel. And to start off with, I certainly found that I was overrunning on my shots, particularly shots where there's distance involved. Maybe you wanted to pot up to the top corner, roll it back down the table. Shots like that, very, very easy, at least to start off with, to overrun using this cue because it has that super solid hit. And likewise also with those shorter shots, when you're looking at cue ball control, again, until you get it dialed in, they can easily be overhit. Now of course, if you're a player that prefers harder hitting cues, then that's something that you're going to be used to already, and so this might actually be the perfect combination for you. But I think overall what impressed me the most with what we have here is, yes, it's definitely a hard or a solid hitting cue, but it just plays so well. And when it comes to looking at Viking cues, I very recently tested another of Viking's models, and that was actually fitted with the ViKore shaft. And the ViKore shaft is the shaft that comes fitted as standard on all Viking cues. And I must say that having played on both of the shaft options, that the V-Pro that we have here is definitely the more solid hitting of the two. That being said, when I did the review that had the ViKore shaft, I did also note that that was quite a firm feeling shaft as well. But what we have here definitely takes it to a slightly higher level. And it's worth noting when you're comparing the ViKore or the V-Pro that we have here, the ViKore is slightly different. It has a little bit of added technology. It's actually got a dampening system at the very end of the cue. Whereas what we have here with the V-Pro, it doesn't have that dampening system. This is quite a simple all maple construction. And another big difference between the V-Pro and the ViKore comes fitted as standard with a Tiger Everest tip, which is a USA made tip, retails for around $20. Whereas on the V-Pro that we have here, this comes fitted with a Le Pro tip, also made in America, but they retail for about $1 to $2. And the Tiger Everest is generally thought of as being a good medium feel all-round tip, whereas what we have here with the Le Pro, this is generally considered to be a slightly harder tip. So I think overall perhaps it's a slight shame that the tip that we have here is Le Pro. Perhaps this would be a little bit better rounded if we actually have the Tiger Everest that's also fitted to the ViKore as standard fitted to the V-Pro. And it's definitely worth noting that all Viking cues come supplied as standard with the ViKore shaft. And if you actually want to change to the V-Pro shaft, it's a free upgrade upgrade doesn't cost you a single penny. But as I mentioned before, the tip that we have on here, $1 to $2 compared to $20 on the Tiger Everest that comes with the ViKore as standard, perhaps that upgrade is somewhat of a slight downgrade. But the bottom line is, if you're a player that prefers that more solid hit to your cues, then this, as it is absolutely superb. So let's go ahead and score this cue for performance. The Helix with V-Pro Shaft has been an amazing cue to play with, and without doubt this is a very solid and strong hitting cue. But at the same time it does not feel at all hard, stiff or dead in its hit. It's a very lively cue with plenty of feedback and a great feel. So if you're a player that prefers a harder hit, then this absolutely hits the sweetest of sweet spots, scoring it a strong 4.5 stars out of 5 for performance. So when it comes to quality, what we have here overall I think is excellent. However, there is quite an important factor to bear in mind when you're looking at buying Viking cues. And that's the simple fact that Viking are a little bit different to some of the other cue manufacturers. And when it comes to buying a brand new pool cue, you can get certain brands where the finish on that pool cue is absolutely flawless. It literally looks like it's been produced maybe on a 3D printer or just stamped out in some way by a computer. And whilst that is lovely to have, you can sometimes lose a little bit of personality. Whereas when it comes to Viking cues, you really can see the care and attention that's gone into actually producing these cues by hand. And so yes, you are going to find the odd little imperfection when you start looking around the cue with a magnifying glass. This doesn't look like it's been mass produced on a computer. And each cue is very much unique. However, that really doesn't detract from Viking cues overall. So yes, the overall finish might not be as good as some of the other brands that are out there, but the cues really are fantastic to play with, and that's the biggest factor. However, there are many elements when it comes to Viking cues that really are as good as anything else that you'll find out there. For example, if we take a look at the inlay work, it's absolutely flawless. And yes, these inlays have been set in a CNC machine, and so you do have those slightly rounded tips to these points. But with regards to the quality of setting all these components, absolutely perfect. Likewise, the quality that we have here, this is a genuine Irish linen wrap, and it has that very, very shiny feel. It's been double pressed and starched. Very, very nice shiny look to it. It has that nice slightly waxy feel. Another feature on Viking cues I particularly appreciate is actually the rubber bumpers. Now, the reason being that when it comes to pool cues, there are a lot of models out there where these rubber bumpers are made from a super hard rubber or even sometimes plastic. When you're manoeuvring the cue around, maybe waiting for your shot and you're just moving it around, sometimes when it's knocking on the floor and you get that super hard feel to it, it can actually be quite exhausting. Whereas what we have here is nice and soft, has a nice feel to it as you're moving the cue around. It's a small detail, but something that I really appreciate. Another big factor when it comes to the quality on this has to be the maple that's used on the shaft. Now, as I mentioned earlier, they don't specify for the V-Pro how long this is aged for, but I suspect that it's probably aged for the same period as the ViKore, which is 5 years. And this is definitely a huge plus point when it comes to the quality of this cue. What we have here is a high quality maple that's been aged for a long time. That's perfect. That's exactly what you want in a decent playing cue. And the general fit and finish on the cue is excellent as well. You can't really feel much between these components. The only one that I really noted is I can just about feel the ring here, only just below the joint. And additionally, the transition coming off of our joint onto the base of our shaft, I can definitely catch my nail on that. It's a slight lip moving upward, but it does feel to be even all the way around, and that's not hugely uncommon when it comes to these stainless steel joints. And the quality that we have here on the printed logo is also very good. These are actually all done by hand on kind of I believe like a rubber stamp kind of a process, and so the quality on these can vary, but this particular one is good. So overall, a very well made cue using excellent materials. But was there anything that I didn't like? Well, when it comes to the butt side of things, there's really nothing that I don't like about the butt at all. Yes, you could say that we have a very slightly darker patch on the wood stain just towards the top here, but really that's been a little bit too fussy because it's not all that noticeable. But my real niggles, if I had any, I'd have to say really are coming to the shaft side of things. And in particular, one of my little niggles is going to be picking up on the Le Pro tip. Now there's a couple of issues that we have with this particular tip. First thing I noticed when I looked at the tip before I'd used the cue was just how much they'd actually shaved that tip down. I can kind of understand why they've done that, because with the Le Pro tip they come with a sealed finish to them, and you don't really get the best performance out of these Le Pro tips until you've broken through that kind of outer seal. So with Le Pro tips you definitely have to grind them down a little bit to get rid of that. However, I think that they perhaps been a little bit overzealous with the preparation on these tips, because they shaved away a lot of material and basically left you essentially with half a tip remaining. Now I should point out that during my testing I didn't actually use this cue because it is quite an expensive cue for any brake shots. But we do have some misshaping on this Le Pro tip. We do have the start of some mushrooming. And remembering I've only put in about 15 hours of play into this, it's compacted even further than it was when it was 100% brand new, and we do have that starting to misshape. Makes me wonder how many more hours I'm actually going to get out of this tip before I have to replace it. So that's a little bit of a shame. I do definitely think, and I have mentioned this on other Viking cues before, I don't think that the finish on their tips is perhaps the best, and I think perhaps they've taken that a little bit too far. And my only other real niggle, and again this is a minor one, is the finish that we have on our shaft here. Again, I love the material this is made from, a super solid feel to this aged maple that they've used. However, having spent 15 hours on this, the seal has actually worn off a little bit. So it's starting to get a slightly rough feel to it. I can actually see that we are starting to get a little bit of a miscoloration here. We use master chalk as a standard chalk when we're testing. We can see that it's just starting to take on some of the chalk colouring here. And again, it's a shame to see that after about 15 hours. I'd like to see a bit more of a seal. You can't stop that completely, that's just what happens. But if we had a bit more of a seal on here, I think we wouldn't see quite that much discoloration. Certainly within that time frame. Now of course I can go ahead and I can seal that myself, it's not a problem whatsoever, but when you're buying a brand new cue, spending a lot of money, you really want that sealed as good as it can be from the off. And for my money, I think they could have done a slightly better job on the sealing on this V-Pro. But do remember of course that every one of these shafts is hand finished, and so you might well find that there's some variation in that seal anyway. So yours may well come better sealed than this one was. So really from a quality perspective, those are my kind of main niggles. So nothing really there that's going to have an adverse effect on the performance of the cue. And likewise there is one other factor that I should touch on. And that actually comes to this little pearl coloured section that we have towards the end of the butt. Now this is 100% a personal preference, but I must say that I'm not a fan of what we have here, for the simple reason that it doesn't actually match the pearl that we have in our inlays here. It does look like a completely different material. In the pearl inlays we have quite complex colours ranging from whites into greys. Looks really nice, whereas what we have here is pure white. And so when you're looking at this cue, even from a distance, it really doesn't look like this section matches the upper section. And in my opinion, to have this section at the end, it either needs to exactly match the material that we have here on the inlays, which this doesn't, or alternatively we could put a section in that's actually the same wood stain colour in there as well. And I think if they did that, if this was just a plain wood section with the same colour wood stain that's used on the upper part of the cue here, I think overall that would give a better balance visually to this particular cue. And that being said, it doesn't actually affect the overall quality of the cue in any way, and this won't be taken into account when we score it for quality, because the quality of all these materials is excellent. It's just from a personal perspective, I found that the stark contrast that we have between these sections to be a little bit detracting from the overall look of the cue. And so, taking everything into account, let's go ahead and score this for quality. And so overall what we have here is a very well made cue. Viking almost have their own unique feel going on, which really does help you appreciate some of the craft that goes into these cues. And yes, there are a couple of minor niggles here and there, such as the finishing on the tip and that the seal on the shaft could be better. But thankfully all of the really important stuff is all top notch, including the superb inlay work and materials, especially the aged maple shaft. So the Helix V-Pro scores a worthy 4 stars out of 5 for quality. When it comes to value, what we have here is a bit of a strange fruit, mainly because with the V-Pro we have purposefully selected a non-standard option and have decided to move away from the standard ViKore shaft. And although there is no cost in that change of shaft, some may argue that with the V-Pro being the cheaper of the tooth shafts, we're perhaps reducing the overall value rather than increasing it. But of course with this shaft we would definitely have a more specialist use in mind. And when it comes to maple shafted cues with good build quality and no technical gadgetry, there are literally hundreds of options to choose from. And perhaps the most direct competitor to the V-Pro shaft from a similar level of manufacturer would be the GS Series from McDermott. And the GS Series also come complete with their basic traditional maple shaft, not dissimilar to the V-Pro. And with the prices of the GS Series running between $365 and $405, they do make this cue look a little bit expensive. Until of course you realise that the GS Series are actually quite plain wood stain design cues and are not fitted with the fine inlay work that we have here on the Helix. And so the GS Series are perhaps more akin to the $400 Viking Keanu models. To get a McDermott equivalent with the inlay work, you'd be looking perhaps at the G Series and changing the G-Core shaft to the traditional maple, just like we did changing our ViKore to the V-Pro. And then prices are very much in line with what we have here with the Helix. Beyond that, Peach Hour have a great selection of inlay models in the $500 to $700 range, which would likely compare very well. So from a value perspective, we're likely in line with similar offerings from other major manufacturers. And it's definitely not the best value pool cue ever created, but it is offering fair value amongst its peers, scoring it a very worthy 3 stars out of 5 for value. And so it's now time to award our Viking Helix with V-Pro shaft combination with an official Average Joe's rating. And to do this, we simply take the scores from across our 5 test categories, and then we can use these to calculate the overall average. And our Viking crosses the finish line with an Average Joe's rating of 3.3 stars. And so if you're a player who likes the thought of a rock-solid hit coupled with both excellent feedback and feel, then the V-Pro could well be the ideal choice for you. And so there we have it. That concludes our review of the Helix from Viking, complete with the V-Pro shaft. And if you are looking at buying yourself a Viking cue, then you've no doubt already noticed that the standard shaft that comes fitted with all Viking models is the ViKore, not the V-Pro that we have here. And so perhaps Viking have made the perfect shaft for those that actually prefer that slightly firmer feel during their game. Because with the V-Pro you're getting all those benefits from having that firmer hit, but also with the feel that you'd expect from a medium hitting cue, including excellent feedback. If you are interested in buying yourself a Viking cue, please remember that we will be adding links into the video description for the very cheapest and best places to buy them. So if you like what we do here at Average Joe's Pool, and perhaps this video has been helpful for you in any way, please be sure to help support what we do here, and please be sure to check out those links. So thank you for joining us here at Average Joe's Pool. I hope it's been helpful, and if it has, please at the very least take 1 second out of your busy schedule. Please be sure to hit that like button for us. And whilst you're there, if you want to find out about any of our upcoming videos, be sure to also hit that subscribe button and also switch on notifications. So thank you once again for joining us, and until next time, strange things are afoot at the Circle K.
I hate you. We're hating the dark side of ourselves.